Geopolitics and Empire is joined by biotech consultant Christie Grace, who has some interesting things to say regarding what's been going on with the whole pandemic. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, Christie.
Thanks. How are you, Hervé?
I'm doing all right. And we connected not long ago. I just kind of stumbled upon your Twitter account, and you've been very active commenting regarding what's been going on. And, you know, maybe to step back, again, you're working as a biotech consultant. If you want to tell us whatever you like about yourself, and then sort of setting the background context as to what are your thoughts? You know, if we go back to 2019 or 2020, what do you make of, you know, this global declaration by all governments of a state of emergency based on public health, you know, COVID-19 and all that? So, you know, I suppose we can start there.
Thanks for having me. And please interrupt, by all means, any questions. I'm a biotech consultant with RNA and LNP, and I design projects for researchers that have a goal in mind of something they want to make, but they don't know how to get there. Like some of the things I've designed are monoclonal antibodies, for instance, and those require using RNA and lipid nanoparticle in a cell in a lab where you make over and over again bunches of antibodies within cells, and then you burst them open and purify. I've done several projects with those different kinds of proteins. Spike protein would have been something I could have designed, but I have not. Probably would have said no to that one. I've managed projects, coordinated them. I know them start to finish, from the scientists reaching out, and every step of a milestone. There's different milestones on projects to shipping. And, you know, when we talk about, you know, going back to 2019, I was worried about a lot of things that was going on in the biotech space, what was being said. Things weren't being said truthfully. And it's been a worry learning about the government regulations and things that were happening at the rate that they were regarding the jabs and then the mandates around the jabs globally, because it seemed to be a collective thing that was going on.
Yeah, so right there, maybe you know, my view as a student of history, international relations, deep politics is this was clearly planned event, because there were so many pandemic simulations, specifically 3 coronavirus simulations right before 2020, and then the details become murky. We're trying to all figure out what is going on. And so you've been working in biotech. I think you mentioned that they've had some products that in the industry they've been trying to introduce that have not had success. So, you know, what's your general feeling or thought as to, you know, what's going on with COVID-19?
Sure, absolutely. Just to talk about some of the projects that I've done briefly, I can't name companies because of NDA or specific projects. I did, and I still do a lot of custom design work, but it's for kids who aren't going to live long. They have this, you know, devastating disease, cancer, adults, and the use of RNA and lipid nanoparticle has been plan B, where with people, their plan A was death, like an early death or, you know, suffering. And the RNA and LNP up until 2019 has been really small amounts, like a liter full or a gallon full, handmade by scientists, purified over and over again, and hand dispensed, where your hand, not with a machine, and then it's with maybe 40 to 50 people in a clinical trial. And, you know, I initially went to school, you know, I have a few majors, and when I spent time in pharmacy, I remember my preceptor saying that medicine as a whole had reached its pinnacle, and there was nowhere really else to go, because we've pretty much gotten all the drugs that we're going to get out of like a pill form, probably with exception, and that biologics were going to be the next step. And, you know, when you talk about, you know, this being coordinated, I've really pushed back on that for a bit until recently. So when you talk about being coordinated, I thought you know, are the things that are happening, was it opportunistic by individuals, you know, where, you know, we know things were happening with the gain of function stuff. But one of the discoveries that I didn't know that started to shift me over to thinking this was something that was coordinated. The NIH in 2019 and 2018, they made a proposition that they were going to eliminate what's called the RAC, and that is a Committee on Biosafety for RNA and DNA and genetic products. And they were getting public opinion to see if that was something they were going to eliminate. And in 2019, they did eliminate the RAC, which was the Biosafety Committee overseeing a separate entity from the NIH to make sure that these things were okay. And that was in August. And what really got my attention was in July, Moderna, their patent for RNA went through in July of 2019. And then I was reading that the NIH had partnered with Moderna for the current jabs. So that looks really bad, man. Like, that looks pretty damning.
Yeah, it looks like they're, as you were saying, from your point in the industry, they're trying to push this, normalize the use of this new product. And I guess before going further, there's always a few people in the comments who say, "Oh, I stopped watching after 5 minutes because they're still promoting the virus narrative." And myself as a consumer, I listen to some of I listen to all perspectives. I'll listen to a podcast of the people who say viruses don't exist, and I keep an open mind. And it's not, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but just your general view on infectious disease or viruses. Again, my view is that I believe in infectious disease, but I act as if I basically live my life as if it doesn't exist. I'm not afraid of it. I'm not, scared if people near me are sick with something. So, and I don't think it's a justification for any sort of like tyrannical, government behavior, like lockdowns or anything that they've done to us. But what's sort of your take on your view on the nature of COVID, whether it's a biological weapon or just the flu rebranded or what? A quick shout out to our sponsors, which you can locate via the sponsor page on geopoliticsandempire.com, or whose links are included in every podcast description. I've tried privacy phones in the past, such as Silent Circle's Black Phone, which turned out to be a dud. The best and really only option so far is de-Googling your phone. Now, you can do it yourself, but I've never had the time to figure that out and simply got an Above phone. They sell de-Googled phones that come with a suite of software. They also provide support and a monthly Above privacy suite with many features such as a unique phone number, encryption, email, VPN, and so forth. If you're looking for a private phone, check out Above Phone. Make sure to click on the Above Phone link on geopoliticsandempire.com or via the podcast description so that we can enjoy a commission. Also, check out the Nomos Time Bank at nomos.net, which you can download in Spanish or English to your Apple or Google or de-Googled phone. Nomos allows people in your community to exchange services using time as a currency rather than fiat money. This will be one great way to survive in the coming algorithm ghetto. If you need health insurance, you can talk to my friend James Guzman of the Borderless Blog, Podcast, and Health Insurance. He offers free consultations. Simply schedule a time with him over at borderlesshealthinsurance.com. Finally, you can donate directly to Geopolitics and Empire, consult with me, the host, or become a member to join private monthly member Zoom calls where we shoot the breeze discussing world events.
I believe, like you do, that viruses are among us. There are some that are worse than others. I mean, we could talk about the H5N1 that had gain of function on it and what's happening with that, because that is something to be a bit watchful on. But yeah, I do believe in viruses, and they can cause harm in the elderly. As far as the recent one, I've watched the interviews just like you. I want to see the other side, and then I'm always open to shifting my opinion and taking in new information. And I think that's key, that you don't want to stay rigid in your thoughts because things change and we get new info all the time. So I've watched the researcher out of Wuhan. She's been on a few, I forget her name offhand. She was from China and she came to the US. And I think she was on Fox News and Dr. Drew and some other places, and she was going over the fear and cleavage site and how they did pass through. And I believe that happened. Absolutely. Like we know gain of function. I think Boston University, there was something in the news that they were manipulating viruses. As far as I know, with the protocol for what I do for a living and what I've designed, to have something escape from a lab means someone had to do something wrong, and that's questionable to me.
That's why, for me, the idea of a lab leak doesn't make sense, because the protocols are so strict. I would have to view that there was some sinister criminal intent to get this out on purpose. And I've got many guests that I very much respect. Francis Boyle, going back 3 years, who. People play it safe from a legal perspective. You have to say it's a leak until you can find the damning evidence that someone intentionally put it out there. I get that, but at this point in the game, I mean, I think it's kind of obvious. And so it seems like the goal, then, going back to the RNA, I've had Stephen Mosher on, head of Population Research Institute, and I agree with him. He says that the whole pandemic was brought. Virus was brought, however, was to get us to take what I call the Pentagon juice, right? The jab, the injection. And then we can get into this later. That was to get us to accept a digital passport, which is the social credit system, which would force us to obey 100% completely the government. But let's go then with the pandemic happens 2020, and then now they're pushing these this Pentagon juice. I was just reading this morning, Australia now is pushing the 5th booster.
Yeah.
I'm still on my zero shot. And so what do you see? What are all the strange things or anomalies surrounding this Pentagon juice? Because I don't, for me, it's like just alone the behavior of our government saying, if you don't take this, we're going to take away your job, your ability to buy food, to travel, to see your family. Like, I mean, if it's so great and necessary, everyone would be like, yeah, I need this. But like, if you're threatening me, basically, if you're threatening to kill me if I don't take this product, that alone is a red flag. Like, whoa, something weird is going on. So what's your take?
Thanks for asking. I've watched a lot of I think some similar shows that you've watched and listened to podcasts. And I've tried to kind of skirt the periphery and not quite dip my toes in that. I've been so focused on the science and the lipid nanoparticle and all the damage that's doing. But when I start to look at videos of like Trudeau saying, "Ooh, that felt great in my arm. I feel a tingle," and blatant lies. I think there's been blatant lies throughout the last 2-3 years. I know the United States isn't as locked down as other areas, and we don't have the same things happening. Like when we see the videos coming out of Australia and the camps that they had set up, that scared the crap out of me. And then the social ID. So when you talk about that, there's a patent that I found that is tied to the social credit system, and it's an app. And it was a combination of, and it was just developed within a couple of years, that would also show your medical status tied into your social ID. And if you got so many jabs that were going to be tied into it. I just want to say, for people watching and listening, I was against listening or reading any of this stuff. I'm lefty politically homeless. So, and I am starting to shift over. I don't want to say to this side of the fence, but I'm starting to question things. So I've been just holding firm in the science, saying I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't know what's going on there. But now, in combination of like the RAC being dissolved, just the sequence of events that have occurred, then you said with the credit system and the social ID, yeah, I worry that that's going to be tied into not just the current jabs, but other medical stuff too. That's not where it's going to end. Which is why I would never get genetic testing on myself. Just an FYI. I can't advise anyone to not do that, but the movie Minority Report really comes to mind as well. And having your genetics on file with a company means you just gave away your you just gave that away.
No, I think that's an important point. I did want to get to the RNA stuff, but that's why I refused the PCR test from the get-go, because I saw from the very beginning, again, the end game is this algorithm ghetto. People get tired of me saying it, but it's this social credit system, and China is a prototype of that. I'm not saying China's the one bringing it to the world. It's these global transnational elites, and China is one laboratory of many. And you see in China, they need to have all of your biometrics. They have to have a digital ID, your iris scan, your fingerprints, and even your DNA, as you mentioned. Yeah. And I found mainstream article from China a couple of years back where, again, I've mentioned this before, the Chinese government admitted that they created some fake health scare to get Chinese people, citizens, to give their blood, do these blood tests, and then that was actually used to capture their DNA, because that goes as part of the social credit system. And so again, I felt these PCR tests were either trying to normalize this idea going forward, and the CDC tweeted. People can go back, and if they haven't deleted it, but like a year ago, the CDC tweeted that, oh, guess what? By the way, 10% of PCR tests are sent, for DNA, sort of capture. And so it's like, that's what's going on. So that's why I refused the PCR test. And maybe you can comment that. I don't think the PCR tests make any sense whatsoever. But going back to the Pentagon juice, I mean, you're talking about RNA. There's people talking about spike proteins. And more I'm hearing people around me, like a friend tells me that here in Mexico, his friend or cousin who's got topped up 3 times with the jab has Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Yeah.
Another friend.
Sorry.
Yeah, another friend of mine. His father just passed in his 60s. He worked for a pharmaceutical company. He was, I believe, injected he died from an aneurysm. And now I'm reading that reporter, 49 years old, who was in Qatar, whose brother is homosexual. He had the shirt. They wouldn't let it. He had the rainbow shirt. They wouldn't let him get into the stadium. He passed a couple months back, that journalist, of an aneurysm. So I'm wondering, there's all this talk in independent media about, is this spike protein that goes in your body and it's just going all around your bloodstream and system, and it'll end up in your heart and give you cardiac arrest, or it'll end up in your brain, and that could be what's causing the aneurysm or cardiac arrest. Yeah,
I can explain the aneurysm actually. Mm-hmm. So this is so there hasn't been any studies that I'm aware of that show this just currently. So I just want to say that this is a possible mechanism from what I know from lipid nanoparticle, not the spike. The lipid nanoparticle, for everybody watching, I know it's kind of abstract when you think about it, but if you think about the lipid nanoparticle like an orange that you would eat, and on the outside rind of the orange has the peg that everybody talks about, which isn't the worst part, actually. That's actually the least harmful. And that has some chemicals inside of it. Then I've gone over this on some of my Substacks, so I don't want to glaze anybody's eyes over, or like to have the information, but I don't want to overload. But it's got the pegylated, it's got something called the DSPC, it's got cholesterol in the rind of the orange, it's that shape. And then if you imagine the flesh of the orange having more of the what's called ionizable lipids, and then in the center, the seeds would be the RNA, and those are covered with or surrounded by other charged lipids. So when the freeze-thaw process happens, there's been studies that prove, including by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ko. I just had to shell out a handful for this article. It was behind a huge paywall just to confirm what I was thinking. Dr. Ko is a global specialist in LNP. So they've done studies, so have others, that the lipid nanoparticle as a whole is degrading in the freeze-thaw process. And when that happens, it starts to come apart. And there's 3 parts that occur with the lipid that should cause. So when we talk about aneurysms or people that are dying within 15 minutes at a pharmacy of getting the jab, that hit the news recently. I think another woman died. It was so fast. The lipids inside are aggregating when they degrade, and they're also shifting in the freeze thaw. So if you imagine little, hold on a second. I just happen to have some little, so if you imagine a lipid is just it doesn't look like that, little ball. Maybe there's a smaller one because they vary in size. And if you imagine, they start to clump together. And, to say their exact size, they're between 60 and 200 nanometers in size. So they start to clump together because they like each other because they're lipids. And then also there's an electrostatic charge to it. But then on top of that, it's called Ostwald effect, where like one lipid will be hanging out that's bigger than a smaller one. And it's like Pac-Man, where it doesn't eat it, but it like sucks it in. So if you get enough of these together, it's 5 microns in size required for an aneurysm. So if you get like 10 of these together, there's your aneurysm, and it's going to go right to your brain. So it's not the spike protein, because the spike protein, when you use cells and you make a protein in a lab, which are the projects I designed for like the antibodies that I talked about, those take time. It's not automatic where your cells turn over the spike protein and make it right away. That takes a day or two before it's reaching like its peak amount. So it's the lipids that are clumping together, and it doesn't take that much in size. And something happened when they were frozen and then transported and then thawed, and they swelled. Some of them broke apart, and then they joined together in a clump, and it sucks. So it's basically just luck of the draw. It's just
on that question, speaking of the luck of the draw, like again, in independent media or alternative media, like I think we have to be balanced with a lot of stuff. In the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a lot of sensational stuff coming out of independent media, the snake venom in the water, and so many people are going to die. I think we have to be balanced, not like the mainstream people who say everything's fine, no one's dying, nothing's happening. That's not the case either. As we're discussing, there's people now, all these athletes. I mean, John Stockton, famed and NBA Hall of Famer, came out. He said he's got a list of 1,000 athletes that he believes have died because of this. And so
the pilots,
the pilots. I mean, we can go on. And then my question is, so yes, there are people who are expiring. There are people who are having injuries, myocarditis, whatever. And then there's people who apparently nothing is going on. For those people where nothing has happened to them, do you think, maybe what they got had expired, or it got wasn't stored properly, and so they got a dud, and so from here on out they're fine? Or
actually, it was stored properly was the better thing. It's a combination of, I think some were, if they broke apart, there's a better chance that it degraded and toxicity would have happened, where if it would have stayed whole in its meant to be state. I mean, it just varies. Like there was a study when you talk about athletes, there's been actually more than one, and they weren't hypothetical. They were ran in labs and serious tests were done, that the more lean you are as a person, like I'm a runner, like so I'm at higher risk. The more lean you are, the stronger your immune system response and the inflammation. So people who are obese are actually having less of a reaction because they have a lower immune response and lower inflammation, where in the beginning we were told that for the virus that they were higher at risk, and for that they may be, but for the jabs, it's the opposite.
And would you say then, for let's say those people who dodged the bullet and got injected and nothing has happened so far, so do you think they're fine, or is there some like time bomb mechanism where maybe in a year or 2 or 5 this as you said, this lipid can cause some effect?
It's an awesome question, because I've consulted with some doctors, because I'm obviously not a medical doctor, but I have had these exact talks with people I'm not going to name that are famous doctors out there. And we talked about the cholesterol and the lipid. When it degrades in the freeze thaw, it's turning to oxysterol, which is a oxidated carbon product, which effectively means it's a toxic cholesterol. And there are studies not linked to the jab, but just to the cholesterol that you would eat when it's oxidized, that is linked to neurodegenerative, fibrosis, a host of immune system issues. And so the repeated exposure, if people keep getting it, then you're going to keep exposing yourself to oxidized cholesterol that has harmed you. I've had some other talks with some researchers, and we talked about the spike protein. So I have the studies. So everything I'm talking about, there's a study to back it. The spike protein itself, regardless in the virus or in the jab, misfolds. So so here's my representation of the spike protein. It looks like this curly cute thing, but everywhere it has a little stringy thing. That's the spot it's supposed to be in. And when the human body makes it, because it's foreign, if you get the jab, it could come out like this. And the body doesn't have a mechanism to put that the right way. Like in a lab, if this would be made in a lab in many cells, you have to use what's called a buffer and a detergent, and it's a two-step process to get it to fold back together over and over and over again. But if the body keeps cranking out, and back to the RNA part being bad too, misfolded proteins can lead to disease and can be oncogenic, which can lead to cancer. Because I know we're seeing turbo cancers, and I think it's a combination of the lipid and this right here. But so some could, to answer your question, I don't know. I don't want to misspeak, but I'm worried about it. I'm not going to dismiss it.
Yeah, I mean that's again, if you don't know, we don't know. And
but I'm worried. There's no tests. They didn't study crap.
Yeah, and this is all experimental. And another.
Well, we know there's toxicity in the testes and the ovaries. So I'm connected with that. So I've been reading the ICANN reports, and I've connected with lawyers too, and I've been consulting on the back end for some of this stuff for the litigations coming out. And in the ICANN report for the recent Pfizer data dump that happened February 2nd, the toxicology studies came out. I could pull them up on my screen here, but they admitted to knowing there were issues with sperm, and it was going to possibly cause fertility issues.
ICANN is great. Del Big Tree of the High Wire. I met him last
Really?
month here in Mexico. I kept running into him at the elevator. I posted a photo with me and him on social media. He spoke at the Greater Reset here, and one of the few organizations that I've donated to was ICANN and Children's Health Defense, because they're bringing the law down and winning. And just on that note, right? So we're seeing again some people the consequences of what's going on. Some people get injected, nothing happens. Others are having severe, people getting paralyzed, these clots, amputations. Other people expiring. I'm trying around the Pentagon tube sensors, and as you mentioned, fertility, and there's always this talk of depopulation. Just yesterday, I was editing some podcasts, and I came across the Club of Rome, and 5 days ago, Dennis Meadows from the original 1972 report. He was, he's the guy who was basically saying we need to drastically, in between the lines, cut the population. And a lot of these elites are openly saying that. And so I'm wondering, in alt media, we've had this sort of Hollywood cartoonish view where they just want to call us. But I think the number one way would be through what you just mentioned, fertility or sterilization. So it's not going to be as obvious or like Hollywood-esque an outcome, but if it's like that Utopia film, I mean, if a whole swath of the population can't have kids in 1 or 2 generations, we're going to see a huge, massive decrease in population. And any thoughts on the fertility and issues in sterilization?
I do, but I have a question for you because, this is something I've been thinking about. I have a couple of questions, and it also, people can think about this for a while. So if this is such a big thing, why aren't they hiding it more? So I'm a fan of crime shows and Gibbs, and I have a friend who's a lieutenant and hostage negotiator, and he always tells me, always look under, Christie, always look under. And going back to some of the other people we talked about, when you talk about plans within plans, like the movie Dune, plans within plans. And so the WEF, they're all in that space wherever they were. I forget where, Sweden, where were they? I don't even remember.
Davos, yeah.
And everybody's there in this big news event. Why would they publicize it unless that is to hide something else? And I don't know what the other thing is, but I can't imagine if this is going on, they're just hiding right out in the open, as it's called, or like, have you thought about? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to dodge your question, but I know this is something that you've probably thought about too. What else could be going on underneath that we don't know about? Because why would they want to be so public about it?
No, I agree with you. I mean, we're in a fog of war. I know my past guest, JJ Cooey, was bringing up.
I was going to bring up,
similar points, and totally, that's valid. Other logic that, reasoning that I could just sum up to explain this. At some point, I think if they have some, diabolical plan, they have to carry it out, and it has to be, come out in the open. And it's like launch when you start a war. And at that point, they feel they're powerful enough that they can't be stopped, and they just get on with it. It could also, as you say, something else could be going on. But also, I think if you study like sociopaths and psychopaths, and you like serial
I have psychology majors. I do.
Right.
Keep going.
Wouldn't you say though that from stuff that I've read and seen, even in movies, when you see that these killers or whatever, they sort of seem to get off on you knowing about what they're doing, because again, they feel they've got the upper hand and you can't really do much, and so they're just kind of in your face about it. No, I don't know.
So I want to talk about the psychology in the last 2 years. There's a book called The Rape of the Mind by Mirlu. I don't know if you're familiar with. He's a psychoanalyst from the 60s, and he detailed out what happened in Germany in the camps, and what we're seeing the last 2-3 years exactly goes down the list of what Mirlu detailed out, where isolation, and then you have breaks in isolation. I don't like the phrase mass psychosis because it doesn't cover it. Mirlu coined, and he has this great book called The Rape of the Mind, where forced teaming. So that's a sociopathic thing where we're all in this together. That was a phrase that kept getting uttered. We're all in this together. So it forced people to other the people, and it formed severe division. And then you had constant bombardment of the, bodies being burned in India. Like I'm trying to remember all the propaganda that was happening, that was designed to create fear. And then it's basically making people into robots is what the end result is, menticide. And again, I have to just be so specific. I wasn't thinking this way 2 years ago. Like this stuff wasn't entering my mind until I started reading more and seeing more and saying, okay, they dissolved the committee that protects us from these genetic products, and they get rid of it right as they approve a patent, and then the same group, NIH, partners with Moderna. But with regards to the depopulation event, I don't know. Like, I don't want to say yes, but I think it's a matter of opportunity. Mm-hmm. That there was many players involved, and I don't know if it's been coordinated, but I think people have been playing off of things, taking advantage.
Yeah, and I bookmarked that Rape of the Mind book.
That's so awesome.
I haven't read it yet, but I'm planning to. And just one more regarding the Pentagon juice, the issue of, I've never had a guest on, I guess, from your background to really talk about some of these issues, but like this idea of shedding, those of us that are not injected. And then if we're walking around, neighbors, friends, family in the supermarket, people who have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 shots, can something from them carry over to us and harm us?
That's an awesome question too, because I just saw Peter McCullough go on an interview, and he was discussing that you need to keep a distance from people within 90 days, possibly. I think Stephanie, is it Cernoff? I don't want to pronounce her name.
Senef. I've interviewed her on my TNT radio show. So yeah, talk to her.
They're all really great people. I don't know. I don't know if it's happening or not. I have a FOIA of my own, so for a Freedom of Information Act request, where it's different than what ICANN's is, where I'm requesting some really specific science stuff for a year. It's going to cost me a boatload, but I don't care. So some of this I hope to find out soon in my FOIA request with regards to them giving me what's called just analysis on the lipids and the RNA without using specific language that goes beyond what they've already released. So I'm like digging in deep. But I don't know about I don't know if it's happening or not. I've talked to a few people, and we talked about the misfolded protein and the the prions, or like the Creutzfeldt Jacob. So I think there's like, was it 20 or 30 people diagnosed with effectively like similar to mad cow? And where did that come from? And then I thought, we're worried about transfusions and setting up a plasma center for people who have not partaken in the jab juice. Yeah, as far as shedding, I can't say. I don't want to misspeak. But I am worried. But I am worried about a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and again, this is like the Twilight Zone. This is uncharted territory, and again, I'm a little bit outside of my league when it comes talking to this stuff. But what other regarding everything we've talked about, or anything we haven't touched on, what else is for you interesting or important that we need to be thinking about, or that you want to inform people about?
Thanks for asking. So I don't know if anyone's seen the videos, like, is it John Campbell out of the UK, the nurse, and a few others, Matt Crawford. People were talking about the embalmers finding really long clots. And there were a lot of people pushing back on that, saying that's not possible. Somewhere on either YouTube or on Twitter, I can link up the actual study information. There's a little small, again, the lipid nanoparticle has many parts. There's a little small lipid in there called a liposome that's holding a negative charge, not a positive. And I found the study that was just done in 2019 that proves, and there's photos too, that it is driving the formation of clots. And then the lipid, and think about lipid like a fat, it's mixing with what's called, fibrin in the platelets. And it is causing those huge clots that branch out. Like, that's real. That's not science fiction. And the really scary part about that is they found that it's making clots at a rate of 1,000-fold more than if your body just made a clot by its regular processes, if that makes sense. Like, that should freaking like make you poop your pants, like the thought 1,000-fold at the rate of, and that it's true. And again, I can post a study, and it was from 2019. So this was a study done on manufactured artificial lipids, which that lipid nanoparticle is. So I really wanted to set the record straight, because right in the beginning, I didn't think it was possible that was happening. I was looking at those, like the abnormally long clots things, thinking that they might have been faked, and they're not. I know Naomi Wolf and others were even retweeting when I had posted that. So just know that is not fantasy, that's reality. And again, it's the luck of the draw. Mm-hmm. Also, AstraZeneca. So they had the mechanism for their clots, and they pulled that jab, right? And they found that it was because platelet factor 4, it's called PF4, was binding with a negative, like positive and negative. Like, do you know if you like rub a balloon on your hair, it actually picks up minus negative charges, and then you can stick it to a piece of metal, and the metal has a positive charge. So positive and metal attract. I hope this is all right to understand. So the negatively charged, sometimes the lipids can be negatively charged in those LNP, and I think that's doing the same thing. And that's why we're getting some. So we have a variation in fast clots or slow moving ones, which I have a Substack that details out the mechanisms if anyone really wants to go there on the science hole. So when you talk about long-term effects, they're like, one of the lipids is cholesterol, and there's also a study on that sucker that it can drive the formation of clots, but it's a slower moving process. And I don't know if that's responsible for the microclots or not, but just know that those are in combination with the spike, but also the lipid. So it wouldn't matter if it was not the spike protein and you got injected with something else with a lipid, or just the lipid itself. You could be up for bad news bears.
And coming from, working in biotech and your background, after discussing these lipids and clots and aneurysms and cardiac events and all of this stuff, and then you discussing how they eliminated the safeguard, the Biotech Review Commission and whatnot, and then what if you're trying like as a detective trying to figure out well what's going on, would you view that they're just trying to make money, or they want to get it where I mean in all nations around the world that these products become like a new normal regular use? How do you make sense of what they're trying to do given all of this collateral damage that's going on?
Another awesome question. I think there's multiple hands in play. What was that? The invisible hand in the market. I think that certain individuals took money and made money, and there's multiple parts. Like I think there's people that want money and they're like psychopathic entities, like Dr. Malhotra would call them, where they don't have a conscience and they don't care. Like that recent whistleblower for Veritas that was on, and he's like, it's really like, it's great, we're doing the thing. So I think there are a bunch of people that want to make money. There are people that want to take advantage of that, and they push their own agenda. And so they're using that. So like, of course, you've got the people that want to make money, and then like we don't know who's in the CDC and all these other places. We would have expected them not to have bad intent, but how long have they had bad intent for? So I feel like it's a bunch of bad actors playing off one another and taking advantage of the situation. And then, when we talk about the WEF and the other stuff, do they not care? Are they hiding in plain sight, or do they have other gross things going on?
Do you think they can roll out?
Oh yeah, so they're gonna incorporate it into everything. So that was your question. So I have a couple of friends that did work for the jab company, and one still does for one of them. And sometimes I get some info shared, but not a lot. But yeah, they're gonna try to incorporate it into everything, and that this was the push, to open the door and open the floodgates. So just to like comment on that, the FDA in the U.S. has a rule: if a drug is approved, and whatever processes that were involved, if it's approved, if another drug is similar to it or a medical device, the second drug doesn't have to be tested based off the first drug, and then you can just launch off. But the current rule is if like the first drug would get recalled, those other ones don't. Like if that first thing had, like Vioxx, anywhere from 60,000 to like 250,000 people died from that sucker from clots back in like the early 2000s. But any drug that was formulated or approved after that one is not subject to getting pulled off the market. So that scares the crap out of me. So with these current jabs, because I've been on a couple of other podcasts where I walk through the whole process and the timelines of how they had to be violated. Even if they're rushed, you can't physically move through processes. Some of them you just can't race through. But if that all happened, and now they're starting to do clinical studies and it's already been approved, then everything else can just launch off of it and they don't have to do the safety studies. That scares the crap out of me. Also, the FDA, if anyone wasn't aware, just made the ruling with Biden that animals no longer have to be used in studies of any kind for drug approval.
We've become the
holy crap
animals, and
I'm trying not to swear.
my other question was, do you think they can keep us in this permanent biosecurity state? Like if they can run a sequel to COVID, COVID 1984 2.0, they're talking about the next pandemic. How do they know? And we've heard talk at that G20 Bali meeting some months ago where they want to have this One Health WHO global universal recognized passport. And so my fear is that what you're talking about, these new products, that in some way they can mandate all citizens to be injected with this crazy stuff, or else, like if you don't, you can't go into the supermarket. I mean, even here in Mexico, in some states, statewide, they said you can't buy yourself. You can't buy food, starve to death because you're not injected. You can't even go to the public park. One state had the official. It was hard to police, I suppose, but technically they said you can't go to the public park if you don't have your digital passport. And so, do you think they might try something like what they did again, or the road ahead? What are your thoughts?
That's another great question. I've been watching the patents and looking into what's rolling. And sometimes people share, when we talk about Twitter, I got people that share DMs with me, and I have to make out if that was a nefarious link, something I shouldn't click on. But a couple of people have shared with me patents that talk about the thing that I talked about earlier, about the combining your medical info with your social credit and ID. I'm afraid that I hope it's not coming, but I know, like you said, it's happening in China. So, yeah, I'm scared that that's coming, especially with the moving to purely digital currency and everything going digital. So then they can just flip a switch. Like I don't know if you know people who got their PayPal accounts shut down.
Me, the DHS.
Did you? I did not.
The DHS last April told PayPal I'm banned, so they shut me off. And I just read yesterday, Lauren Southern, whatever people think of her, her parents, who have nothing to do with anything, were banned from Airbnb. She posted a message that her parents got that said, "You're associated closely with somebody who's banned from Airbnb, therefore you can no longer use Airbnb." We saw that German journalist Alina Lipp covering Ukraine. Her parents also had their bank accounts closed because of their daughter's reporting. So this is now expanding in the Western world. And so yeah, I mean, people don't get it until it happens to them, like, to me and so and others. And this is just the beginning. Jeremy McKenzie, military veteran in Canada, Scotiabank just shut his account, and no other bank will open an account for him. He's got 3 kids and a mortgage. So welcome to the algorithm ghetto. I say it's going to be fun trying to figure out how to survive in this system. And one more question, like consequences, everything that you're talking about. There's all these people in the alternative media for the past 2 or 3 years talking about Nuremberg 2.0, and we had the whole Corona committee that just fell apart. Nothing happened. And do you think there's going to be any consequences for the Faucis out there, or
no? Sucks, but no. Sorry, I mean to interrupt. And I think that too many hands in pockets. Like when I think about politics, a lot of times I think we're looking at different heads on the same hydra. And even though there's certain people, Republicans that are fighting for stuff, but until I see action, I am just going to look at it like gums flapping and peacocking, pandering, pissing contest, whatever you want to talk about. They can sit there and say all these things all the time, but unless they're reversing mandates, unless they're reversing this stuff that's happening and fining, like giving PayPal a fine, I don't see it getting any better, and I don't see anyone doing anything. Like we have the U.S., like what you talked about, those committees, and I think it's going to take getting our current administration out of office to get some changes happening, to get the mandates. Like Thomas Massey, senator, he's fighting hard. He's fighting really hard, and so are some people in California. Like I think they just paused the mandates against the doctors with regards to informed consent. But I don't think anyone's going to get punished.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That's the hard truth. And I just caught like a few minutes of clips of the State of the Union. And
how did you stomach it?
No, this is my point. It's like I refer back to George Carlin. It's one big club, and you're not in it. And even something Biden said something against the Republicans, and then you see Marjorie Taylor Greene and others like booing, and I'm like, it's an entire clown show of these 500 plus people, and the Republicans, it's a business for them to keep them in business, elected and getting money. It's a fake conservatism, and as you said, they're not laying down their jobs and lives to fight for what's right. They're fakes. Right. They're frauds. Except
put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, except for the maybe a Thomas Massey and or a Rand Paul or some handful, maybe a Tulsi Gabbard or something like that. But we got to go JFK. It's like go big or go home. And it's not looking good. It's not looking good out there. And then, any other final thoughts on what any of us can do at this point?
Find groups of people that are in person, not just online, to get support from. Now, that's been difficult for me. I lost most of my friends and family in the beginning of 2020 when I knew that the virus was not that dangerous and people were freaking out, and I was keeping my calm. I was one of the few people, and I lost a lot of friends, and I think we all have a lot of online contacts, but do what you can to generate some in-person ones, because when the poop hits the fan, if it does, that's going to matter. If you're flying Han Solo or you're part of the revolution that's physically on the ground, like in your little cities or wherever, I think that's the biggest thing, is developing a community, physical community. I mean, this is great that we're connecting, but if like we needed to bolt somewhere or something happened, it's better that's when a village is better. And I think a lot of it's been covered in other podcasts. Like some people have talked about stocking up on food, but we're actually seeing I don't know how it is in Mexico, but we're seeing costs finally come down of eggs. Like I paid $2.50 a dozen this morning, and I almost fell over in the store when I looked at I was shocked.
That was cheap. I mean, they were much higher.
Yeah. Yeah, they took a nosedive. So I live in Wisconsin, so there's a lot of Amish farms on the outskirts, and sometimes I'll drive to those. But I think becoming self-sufficient and growing your own food, which you can do indoors. So like if a lot of people say I can't do that, I don't have a yard. Like I have a bedroom with set up. It's not hydroponics, but I've got microgreens and other things growing in there, and tomatoes all year round. So there's things that you can do to at least. I mean, you can't live off of that, but supplement. I think trying to pull away from the system right now is the best thing.
Yeah, that's been discussed on this podcast frequently, and
we got to make our own networks.
Yeah, or you can become Amish. That's your solution. And I'm from Illinois, so you're in Wisconsin. So we're sort of
I'm in
neighbors.
Madison.
Yeah, we sort of are kind of neighbors, but I ended up down here in Mexico, and so yeah, really good stuff you're doing. I'm glad. I don't know how we connected somehow on Twitter, and
I actually listened to you on SoundCloud because I listen to music on there when I go for hikes, and it came up as either a suggestion or something that I found JJ Cooey and your interview on SoundCloud, and that's when I reached out and said, "Hey, that was an awesome job." Okay.
Yeah, it's just funny how organically we all find each other decentralized through all these different ways. It's not just Twitter and whatnot. And so I'll include your links in the description. You're on Twitter and Substack. Where are the best places for people to find you?
Twitter and Substack. So I've said this on another podcast. I'm not a fan of social media. I think I've said that I hate it, even though I go hard on it. But it's a necessary thing to find sanity, even though that some of them's like insane. Like Twitter is always thought of like this insane thing, but this is how you find sanity, through connections. Yeah, Twitter and Substack are the only two I'm on right now. I deleted all the others. I deleted Facebook. I was actually booted off there at first for sharing a science article.
Yeah, I haven't had a bad experience with Twitter. I've had a good experience, but I have a really thick skin. There's really nothing anyone can say to get to me.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, they try.
My DMs look like a crime scene. Like I get death threats, harassment, and then like the sexual harassment sometimes combined with the death threat is extra special.
And I'm sure some of this it's military intelligence stuff going against us. But I've had my fill of all of this stuff. I mean, there's people who think I'm trying to like get rich and famous from podcasting. I never wanted to do this in the first place. And
ditto.
Yeah,
it's not why I joined Twitter.
Yeah, and it's like I'd be happy to just disconnect completely and go in nature. But this is what I'm doing right now. I'm having fun, and
you're doing an awesome job.
Yeah, this is where we are, and so. I wish I could disconnect, but I'm chatting with fascinating people. So, all right, Christie, I will include your links in the description, and perhaps awesome. we'll chat again. We'll keep the conversation going on social
media. After my FOIA, I would love to as well, because I'm told by lawyers over at ICANN side, they've been advising me. So I have my federal request to get that data. I'm going to let everybody have that once I get it from unreleased Pfizer data.
Well, yeah, stay safe. Watch yourself.
And, I've gotten threats. Like I should say that. So when you said I know we're we're parting ways here, but I guess pick your battles. That's another thing too, because I have gotten 2 threats outside of Twitter, and one came at a hospital from a hospital employee that said he read my Twitter and that I better watch my back, and people like me don't deserve to be there in the hospital getting care.
Get some guns,
Wow.
concealed carry.
We got that in Wisconsin. We are a castle doctrine state.
Krav Maga, practice some Krav Maga.
I am actually in my profile, so I've been Kung Fu for 20 years and combat Pencac Silat per Temperon.
There you go.
Usually I have my weapons on my wall, but I took them down. So
you should keep next time. Put them out there. Give them a nice shine and. It's funny. I used to know a former security guard here in Mexico, and he was telling me, he used to in his neighborhood where he used to live, and there were some annoying people, I don't know, bullies and he would just sit cleaning his gun in front of the apartment complex. And then after that, nobody bothered him. So it's been a great chat, Christie, and thank you for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up for the free email list that goes out with each podcast and every weekend with a collection of news headlines. The newsletter and website are our last lines of defense. We're being censored and deplatformed. It's nearly impossible to find Geopolitics and Empire on the Google search engine. We've been blacklisted. YouTube frequently takes down our videos with strikes. Facebook restricts our page. Reddit and Twitter take down posts. And after the Associated Press mentioned Geopolitics and Empire in a 2021 article co-written with NATO, our Patreon account was terminated. Vimeo also terminated our Pro account. The best free way to help Geopolitics and Empire is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or elsewhere and subscribe to all of our media channels. You can find the video broadcast now on 5 platforms: Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. You can find the audio broadcast on the podcast ecosystem: SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and so on. My current favorite social media channels are Twitter and Telegram, but you can also find us on Gab, MeWe, Minds, Float, VK, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Finally, Geopolitics and Empire is in dire need of funding to continue. You can leave a donation, purchase a consultation with the host, or become a member to receive additional benefits. We also produce a weekly broadcast called Dissident Thinker for members and Rockfin subscribers only. We will continue to fight the good fight come hell or high water. Thank you for listening.